Hey everyone, next is your Diphyllobotrium latum or your fish tapeworm. So brief history. In 1592, Dunus was the first to recognizably describe Diphyllobotrium latum, and in 1602 Platter differentiated it from the Taenia species of humans. In 1777, Bonnet found the scolex of the worm and its life cycle was worked out by Janicki and Rosen in 1917. In 1883, Braun found that the fish contained the stage that transmit the parasites to humans. So, dilatum has been reported to occur in humans throughout the world. In 1970, most of the known cases of Diphyllobotriasis came from Europe, Asia, and fewer cases coming from North and South America. The longest cestode infecting man is your Diphyllobotrium latum. So adult worms, they are ivory colored and very long, measuring from 3 to 10 meters. And the adult worm has three parts. That's your scolex neck, and strobila. You know this. Your scolex is spatulate or spoon shaped and about 2 to 3 millimeters long and 1 millimeters broad. It carries two slit-like longitudinal sucking grooves, your bothy, and one dorsal and another ventral. The scolex lacks suckers and hooks. So, but we already discussed this in the introduction to cestodes. Your neck is thin, no, and unsegmented and is much more longer than the head. And your strobila consists of 4,000 proglottids consisting of immature, mature, and gravid segments in that order from front to backwards. And your mature proglottids measure 2 to 4 millimeters in length by 10 to 12 millimeters in width. And the habitat is the small intestine and usually in the ileum part. And ito, the egg, no, it's a prolific egg layer and a single worm may pass about 1,000,000 eggs in a day. So egg is broadly ovoid, about 66 micrometer by 44 micrometer with a thick brown shell. It has an operculum, no, at one end and often a small knob at the other. So that is your dilatum egg. So the freshly passed egg contains an immature embryo surrounded by yolk granules, and the eggs are resistant to chemicals but are killed by drying. The embryo with 6 hooklets inside the egg is called the oncosphere, and the egg does not float in saturated salt solution and is bile stained. The first intermediate host is your planktonic crustacean copepods, and your second intermediate host is your freshwater fish. Your definitive hosts are your humans, your cats, your dogs, and the fox. And the larval stages, now there are 3 stages of larval development. First stage larva, that is your coracidium. Your second stage larva, that is your procercoid. And your third stage larva, that's your plerocercoid. And the infective stage to humans is your third stage plerocercoid larva. Okay, let's go to the cycle. So let's start with 1. The eggs are passed unembryonated in the feces. So, under appropriate conditions, the eggs mature mga 18 to 20 days and yield the oncospheres which develop into a coracidia. And after ingestion by a suitable crustacean, your first intermediate host, this coracidia, first stage, they develop into the second stage, procercoid. They develop into a procercoid larva image, no? Pag na-ingest nila ng crustacean. Then that procercoid larvae are released from the crustacean upon predation by the second intermediate host, which is usually a small fish. So, diba, pag yung first intermediate host, which is your crustacean, ay nakain sila ng yung second intermediate host, which is usually your small fish, diba? Your first intermediate host, your planktonic crustacean copepods, ay nakainin your freshwater fish, which is your second intermediate host. That procercoid larva, which is your second, diba, your second larval stage, no, they migrate into the deeper tissue of that fish, and they develop into a plerocercoid larva, which is your third stage larva, no, which is the infectious stage for the definitive host that includes us humans. And because humans do not generally eat these small fish species raw, the second intermediate host probably does not represent an important source of human infection. However, these small second intermediate hosts can be eaten by larger predator species that can serve as a paratenic host, no? We have your paratenic host kasi itong mga maliit na isda, hindi naman to, um, hindi naman siguro, itong mga species na ito, hindi to parang kinakain ng mga tao. Pero, merong mga predator fish na kinakain itong mga isda na ito, no? At saka itong paratenic host, ito yung kinakatch natin. Ito yung mga isdang kinakatch natin, no? Asa na ako? Okay, sa paratenic host, no? These small second intermediate hosts, they are eaten by large predator fishes, that is your paratenic host. And in this case, yung plerocercoid, which is the infective stage, they migrate to the muscles of the large predator fish, no? They migrate to the muscles of the large predator fish, and us humans, no, nakukuha natin yung parasite by eating that paratenic host, no, and acquiring the parasite via consumption of undercooked fishes, undercooked paratenic host. Pag kinakain natin sila raw, hindi natin niluluto, no, hindi namamatay yung third stage larva. And in the definitive host, the plerocercoid develops into adult tapeworms in the small intestine. And adult Diphyllobotrids, they attach to the intestinal mucosa by means of two bilateral growths, that yours botria, diba? We learned in the identification of scolex. And the adults, they can reach until 10 meters in length with more than 3,000 proglottids. Immature eggs are discharged from the proglottids up to 1 million eggs per day per worm and are passed in the feces. And eggs appear in the feces 5 to 6 weeks after infection. So one of the greatest medical series in the world, House Empty. They also have a case, no, an episode of the latum. And no, as well as the tinea solium. So one clinical manifestation, no, that is very characteristic of a D-latum infection would be your megaloblastic anemia and diphyllobothriasis. So we describe a case of D-latum infection found on routine colonoscopic screening for colorectal cancer in an asymptomatic patient, which was successfully treated with praziquantel. So, yan. Diba? Kain ng raw sushi, which I admit I also love. So, this vitamin B12, no? When you have D-latum infection, meron talaga yung vitamin B12 deficiency anemia. And this is described in cases wherein there's already prolonged multiple infestation in undernourished population because the worm absorbs this vitamin. Yung diphyllobothriasis naman, the manifestations depends on the mass of the worm. and absorption of its byproduct by the host, and deprivation of the host's essential metabolic intermediates. So there's also a kind of pernicious anemia, sometimes caused by the infection, that is called Bothriocephalus anemia. So we diagnose this with direct fecal smear and your Cato-Cats technique. So there's also a sero diagnosis available. It's a copper antigen detection test that is developed to diagnose Diphyllobotriasis. We treat this by praziquantel or niclosamide. That's 5 to 10 mkd, and parenteral vitamin B12 should be given if the B12 deficiency is already apparent. So infection can be prevented by properly cooking of fish and deep freezing of fish. That's negative 10 degrees Celsius, no, for 24, mga 2 days siguro mo siya i-ref at negative 10 degrees. Pag kakainin mo siyang raw, we also have to prevent fecal pollution of natural waters and periodical deworming of your pet dogs and cats. No. Nowadays, human infection has become rare because the natural transmission cycle from mammals other than humans, no, parang hindi naman siya, parang at some point, hindi naman siya nasusustain. And, pero possible pa rin na makuha natin siya infection, no, from infected raw freshwater fish. Lalo na yung mga isda na siniship. Then siniship nila to places na hindi naman endemic ang latum doon, pero siniship nila yung isda, so nakukuha ng mga taong bumibili. Hindi pa dyan nila gina-freeze, no, tarong, or hindi nila gina-properly cook. So ayun, thank you very much. That's your D latum.